You've now suddenly put Dantas back in the lineup, and Dantas stinks. Like, Dantas absolutely stinks. And we are now literally looking at we're now looking at a situation where Chloe Bibby got garbage time minutes, and then everyone's trying to justify it, being like, "Oh, she was really bad when she got on in the start of the fourth quarter. You know, they cooked her on defense." First of all, like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to hold it against somebody.
The decision to acquire Chloe Bibby raises serious questions about roster management strategy. The signing appears puzzling when considering her limited playing time and eventual benching. What purpose did this move serve if the player wasn't intended for meaningful minutes? The situation becomes more confusing when examining Bibby's early performance. She showed promise in her initial games, yet faced consistent DNPs afterward. If the team didn't plan to utilize her skills, alternative options existed in the market. Defensive-minded wings were available, athletic players could be found, and size could have been added through other acquisitions.
First of all, like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to hold it against somebody who sat on their ass for 3 quarters and then suddenly is put on the fourth quarter when the game is already essentially over. When the game is already over. Like, I absolutely am not going to blame a player for that in those 3 minutes. Like, if she came on and started getting cooked, if they were ahead and she comes on and she's getting cooked and suddenly we're down, and not only that, like, she's being exclusively put on in weird lineups. Like against Seattle, she's had 0 points in her last 2 games.
The coaching decision to reinsert Dantas into the rotation while sidelining Bibby creates additional concerns. Dantas has struggled significantly, yet receives preference over a player who demonstrated capability in limited opportunities. This choice seems counterproductive given their respective contributions. Recent games highlight this imbalance. Bibby received garbage time minutes against the Sparks, playing only when the outcome was decided. Critics point to her fourth quarter struggles, but expecting quality performance from a cold substitute entering a decided game seems unrealistic. A player sitting for 3 quarters cannot be expected to immediately impact winning time.
She has played a combined 15 minutes in her last 3 games. She played 13 minutes in the biggest game of the year against the Phoenix Mercury. She played 13 against the Phoenix Mercury. And you know what? She was good enough to guard Saju. She was seen as being a good enough defender to guard DeWan of Honor. And she forced Paige into 1 of 4 from the field. She is not a bad, she's not a bad defender. She's not a good defender by any means.
Her usage patterns reveal deeper issues. Against Seattle, Bibby again recorded 0 points while playing minimal minutes across recent contests. She managed just 15 minutes total in her last 3 appearances, including only 13 minutes during the crucial Phoenix Mercury matchup. Despite limited time, she effectively defended key opponents and forced difficult shots from star players. Bibby's defensive capabilities shouldn't be dismissed. While not elite, she presents adequate perimeter defense. Her tendency to back off opponents stems from lateral quickness limitations, but she rarely gets completely beaten.
A bad defender. She's not a good defender by any means. The problem is with Chloe Bibby's defense is she does back off a lot. She's hard to beat, but because she's not fast laterally, she kind of backs off, and it's very rare that she gets absolutely cooked on the perimeter. And it's a problem that Sophie Cunningham has her defense as well, except Sophie is quite a bit quicker than Chloe Bibby. But Chloe Bibby is a passable defender. Like, it's not her fault. Like, she should have been there guarding. She's on the floor to start the fourth quarter, and she's guarding ultra-aggressive Diarca Hamby. And I think
this defensive approach mirrors Sophie Cunningham's style, though Cunningham possesses superior speed. The Mercury game showcased her potential. Tasked with guarding challenging assignments, Bibby performed adequately despite questionable substitution decisions. Her early season shooting displayed promise with consistent 3-point accuracy before opportunities dried up. Since those initial games, her shot attempts have been severely limited. Lineup combinations further hamper her effectiveness. Being paired with struggling players like Dantas creates impossible situations.
And I think she was on the floor with, I can't even remember who she was on the floor. It might have been Aaliyah. Oh, no, sorry. No, is she guarding Azare? I think Aaliyah was guarding Cam Brink, and I'm like, she should be guarding Cam Brink. Because Cam Brink's not as much of a threat, not as much of a threat for her, and Aaliyah can guard Azare. Or even still, like, I thought she did a good job defensively against the Mercury. I didn't understand why they were out there.
When Dantas dominates possessions with isolation plays while shooting poorly, teammates become spectators. This dynamic leaves capable players unable to contribute meaningfully. The previous game exemplified these problems. Bibby entered during the fourth quarter in an awkward lineup configuration just as opponents began connecting on shots. Her missed three-pointer becomes magnified unfairly, while plus-minus statistics don't capture the full context. Players can execute correctly yet still suffer from team defensive breakdowns. Meanwhile, Dantas receives consistent opportunities despite repeatedly failing to capitalize.
Why they were out there, like posting, why they were out there subbing her off against the Mercury for defensive reasons. But like, she had, in her first 3 games, she was 2 of 4, 2 of 4, and 2 of 3 from 3. She has taken 1 3-point shot since. And the thing is like, she's being denied. She's just being put on in weird lineups. She was put on against the Seattle Storm with ISO Dantas. Like, ISO Dantas.
Every possession sees her getting exploited defensively while providing minimal offensive value. The contrast in treatment between these players defies logic. Current roster construction suggests an either-or mentality between Bibby and Dantas. Previous games showed both receiving DNPs alternately, indicating they cannot coexist effectively. However, forcing other players like Timms to play alongside Dantas creates similar problems. Any player sharing the court with current form Dantas faces significant disadvantages. Dantas' recent evolution into an isolation-heavy player compounds these issues.
ISO Dantas is what the Indiana Fever had to deal with. Like, she's there on the floor. She's not able to do anything because ISO Dantas is on the floor against the Storm. You've then got a situation yesterday where she doesn't get put on until the fourth quarter, plays like 2 minutes, is in a weird lineup, and they just start hitting shots. Like, she missed the 3-point shot. Okay, cool. And I know you can look at the...
She attempts nearly 1 shot per minute while converting at poor rates. Every touch becomes a scoring opportunity rather than facilitating team offense. While this approach worked against Phoenix, it has failed consistently since. The team's preference for Dantas over Bibby lacks justification. If Dantas cannot be traded due to salary constraints, keeping a more capable player on the bench wastes roster construction. Dantas shoots 30% overall and 27% from 3, while providing negative defensive value and minimal rebounding impact. Team defensive strategies reveal another disparity.
Like, she missed the 3-point shot. Okay, cool. And I know you can look at the plus minus and just be like, oh, she was minus whatever in however many minutes. But like, that doesn't tell the entire story. Like, you can literally do nothing wrong and teams can light you up. She got burned once in this game. But I'm sorry, Dantas got burned in every single possession. Dantas got burned on absolutely every single possession. And I'm just there like, what was the point? So clearly, Stephanie White, it's an either or, because we saw Dantas getting DNPs when it came to Chloe Bibby.
Opponents actively face guard Bibby, recognizing her as a legitimate threat. Conversely, they ignore Dantas, allowing open looks because they expect misses. This contrast in respect levels indicates which player opponents truly fear. The Fever appear to have sour feelings toward Bibby despite her competent play. This situation makes little sense given roster needs. Any mid-season addition should contribute meaningfully to playoff rotations. Current construction suggests Timms and Turner won't receive playoff minutes, meaning Dantas becomes necessary by default.
At one point in this song, she calls the referees useless. And here in the South, we got a saying, you're worthless as tits on a boar hog. Well, I mean, that sounds pretty accurate for the WNBA officiating. And what's pretty wild, and I made this comment because I shared, she has come out, she's been fined again, by the way, by the WNBA because she made comments criticizing when she told them and
Alternative options existed throughout the signing period. Size could have been added through Russell, Linskin, or other available bigs. Instead, the organization committed fully to Bibby before apparently changing their evaluation. Now she sits despite showing more capability than her replacement. Previous performances support this assessment. Against Dallas, Bibby played 6 productive minutes, contributing positively in limited time. While brief success doesn't guarantee stardom, it demonstrates more promise than Dantas has shown consistently over 2 seasons.
WNBA, because she made comments criticizing when she told them and talked about getting fined for this on her podcast. They fined her again. By the way, she made a point to be like, yeah, some of the refs are really good. But she talked about the officiating and boom, they nailed her again. Now, is it uncommon for coaches or players to get fined in a professional league when talking about officiating? No, that's not uncommon. However, when you're
Dantas has received extensive opportunities without capitalizing. Her positive moments consist of isolated quarters rather than sustained excellence. Over multiple years, she has failed to develop offensive consistency sufficient to offset defensive limitations. Meanwhile, Bibby deserves extended evaluation based on her demonstrated potential. The current approach essentially reduces playoff rotation to 9 players, with one being a clearly inadequate contributor. This limitation stems from poor roster management and questionable player evaluation.
That's not uncommon. However, when your league is looking worse than the NFL on officiating, you know what you might ought to do? Sit down in the corner and shut the bleep up. And maybe you ought not be fining your players over it because your officiating is dog shit. I mean, it's bad. It's real bad. Sophie Cunningham has come out on her podcast today and talked about the fact that they nailed her again.
Sophie Cunningham faces mounting financial penalties from the WNBA after continued criticism of league officiating through her podcast, Show Me Something.
Podcast today and talked about the fact that they nailed her again. Good God.
We were talking about like our first week, what people had to say. Well, the WNBA fined me for
dogs. You got fined for episode 1?
Dude, they fined me $1,500. I'm like, what? I'm like, this is just the beginning. I was like, you're kidding.
Oh, way. I'm glad that you saved that for this and didn't text me, because that's...
The escalating penalties have created additional controversy for the WNBA beyond the original complaints. By fining a player for discussing previous fines, the league generated more negative attention than the initial criticism would have warranted. This reactive approach has amplified scrutiny of officiating standards rather than addressing underlying concerns. Fan reaction has been overwhelmingly supportive of Cunningham's position. Social media users have proposed crowdfunding efforts to cover her fines, with some suggesting GoFundMe campaigns specifically for WNBA penalty payments. A petition demanding officiating improvements has gained hundreds of signatures within hours of the fine announcement. The timing of these penalties raises questions about league priorities.
Oh, way. I'm glad that you saved that for this and didn't text me, because that's unreal. I mean, it's like, it's cool for the pod, but that's kind of a bummer. Do they, when you get fined, do they put like verbatim, like quote here, like this is why you're being fined and this is why it's this much? Or is it like, hey, quit talking shit on us, Venmo us like $1,500?
No. What happens is they email our GM, and she pulls me aside and she goes, come here, Soph, I have to talk to you. And this was in like front of everybody. And I was like, what did I do now?
While Cunningham faces financial consequences for verbal criticism, more serious on-court incidents involving player safety have received less punitive responses. This disparity in enforcement has fueled arguments about inconsistent league standards and selective discipline. Professional sports leagues commonly fine athletes for publicly criticizing officials, making Cunningham's penalties part of established protocol. However, the severity and frequency of these fines, combined with persistent officiating controversies, have created unusual circumstances. When officiating quality becomes a recurring public discussion topic, standard enforcement procedures may prove counterproductive. The broader context involves ongoing debates about WNBA officiating consistency.
In front of everybody. And I was like, what did I do now? And she just smiled and she goes, hey, they're going to fine you again. They're like, I was like, I was like, I even told them, I even credited them that their job was hard. I did say that. And I said that I would
No,
not
you
be
did.
good at it. I
Yeah, you
did
did.
say that. Like, look at the whole picture. What are we doing? But yeah, so I
Yeah,
got fined for that. So
I mean, that's absolutely insane. By the way, because she got fined and this made it back to her podcast.
Recent high-profile incidents have highlighted concerns about referee decision-making and game management. Cunningham's willingness to address these issues publicly reflects frustration shared by multiple players and coaches throughout the league. Media attention surrounding these fines has extended beyond sports coverage into mainstream news discussions. Major news outlets have covered the story as part of larger conversations about workplace environments and institutional accountability in professional sports. This expanded coverage brings additional scrutiny to league operations and decision-making processes. League officials face a challenging balance between maintaining authority and addressing legitimate concerns about game management.
Podcast talking about her getting fined, it turns it into a bigger story for the WNBA. They get more negative light shined on them because the enforcer of the Indiana Fever is talking about her getting fined. And by the way, the root of the problem is the officiating is dog shit. If you had referees that were actually doing their jobs, getting calls correct, and by the way,
heavy-handed responses to criticism may suppress necessary dialogue about improvements while failing to address root causes of officiating disputes.
Correct, and by the way, keeping some kind of law and order in the league, you wouldn't have a player that's having to go on their podcast talking about the officiating blows. And of course, as you can imagine, the WNBA is getting blasted over this. Seriously, our Adam Lee says, hey, how about we start a GoFundMe for Indiana Fever fines? I mean, seriously.
Rather than punitive measures against public criticism, leagues could benefit from systematic evaluation and improvement programs that address underlying issues. Current events have positioned Cunningham as an unofficial spokesperson for player concerns about officiating standards. Her willingness to accept financial penalties while continuing to speak publicly demonstrates commitment to addressing systemic problems despite personal costs. The situation reflects broader tensions between individual expression and institutional control in professional sports.